welcome to Aging Matters, a program featuring individuals who talk about aging issues of interest to older adults and their families. I'm Cheryl Beversdorf, your host. Today, I'm pleased to share another episode of Aging Matters Stories of Life, programs featuring guests whose life experiences made a difference to them and to their community. Today, my guest is Dr. Emma Violand-Sanchez, proud immigrant, educator, former Arlington School Board member, and founder of the DREAM Project. Dr. Violand-Sanchez will talk about being an educator in Arlington Public Schools and how she applied her knowledge and experience in her writings and school board service. She will also discuss her work to establish the DREAM Project in order to empower students to overcome immigration barriers in pursuit of an education. So welcome, Dr. Violand-Sanchez, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here.
I'm pleased to have you on Aging Matters, Stories of Life today, and I'd like to get started by hearing about where were you born and raised, and tell us about your early years.
Yes, I was born in Cochabamba, Bolivia. I am one of 6 daughters from Adalberto Violand and Emma Sanchez. I have wonderful memories of my childhood in Cochabamba, the city of eternal spring, surrounded by family and playing with my sisters and enjoying the peach trees in my yard. I loved going to school. I went to school in Cochabamba. Later, I went to Argentina and then to La Paz. My only fears and sad memories of my childhood is remembering that my dad, who was a political leader, was put in jail by the opposition party, lost his business, and was exiled in Peru. So this uncertainty impacted our family. There were many revolutions in Bolivia in the 50s and the 60s.
All right. And so when did you come to the United States? What brought you here? And what universities did you attend?
Well, by 1961, my parents unfortunately separated, and my mother had to move with her 6 daughters to La Paz. And I had an aunt here in the Washington, D.C. area who was a teacher at the Foreign Service. So she thought that the 3 oldest daughters, including myself, we could come and live with American families. And I was able to come here as a nanny to live in Fairfax and attend Mount Vernon High School. So I lived with the Powelson family in Fairfax. And at that time, I was a senior at Mount Vernon High School. I had no friends. I didn't speak English. It was a very difficult year, but fortunately, the family that I lived with really believed that I should go to college, and they helped me apply for scholarships. And I was admitted to Radford College at that time, was the women's division of Virginia Tech. And I was able to get a scholarship and work on campus to pay my room and board. So I received my bachelor's and master's from Radford, and later my doctorate from George Washington University.
And if I understand correctly, and from what I know about you already, you selected education as your major and obviously your career. So why that choice? Tell us more about that.
Well, when I was in Radford and studying modern languages, I always believed that bilingualism was a social, economic, and educational asset. So I thought I could be an interpreter, travel around the world. But then I thought, I met my college sweetheart, Al Giddings, and I thought, well, I can't travel around the world. So how about if I become a teacher? And I did my student teaching, and I loved it. I discovered my joy in teaching, and so I was able to become a teacher in 1966.
I also understand, though, about that time you faced some very personal challenges in your life. Talk about them and how that affected your vocation as an educator.
Well, back in 1967, when I married Al Giddings, he had to go to Vietnam. So we only were married for 6 months. We lived together for 6 months. He went to Vietnam, and unfortunately, he died in August 1968. At that time, I was in Radford completing my master's in counseling. It was such a devastating experience for me because I couldn't see myself in 1968 living in this country away from my family. And there was so much turmoil in this country. So I decided to go back home to Bolivia. I taught at the university level in Bolivia, as well as was a counselor in schools. And three friends and I founded a nonprofit organization, Un Maestro Más, because we saw the inequities in Bolivia. There were many rural children that didn't have access to education. So as a result of these nonprofits, we were able to establish 15 elementary schools in the Altiplano in Bolivia. So that was very meaningful to me to have access to education to children in Bolivia.
So, certainly very impressive work that you did in Bolivia, but what brought you to Arlington, Virginia?
Well, by 1976, I faced the glass ceiling in Bolivia. Being a woman, the opportunities were also limited. And I thought that I wanted to continue with my doctorate. I had become a US citizen because being a widow of a serviceman that died in the war, I was able to become a US citizen. So decided to come back to the States and started my studies at George Washington University. At the same time, I was fortunate to find a job as a bilingual resource teacher in Arlington Public Schools. I did remarry and had two children, continued to work in Arlington and work for providing programs and education to immigrants and refugees.
So, when you started working in the Arlington Public Schools, that was your primary focus?
Yes, yes. I started as a bilingual resource teacher because at that time, Arlington experienced the influx of refugees from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. At the same time, the school system was not providing services to English language learners. And at that time, the federal government required that we establish bilingual education when we had a significant number of children that spoke a language, given language. So we established program in Spanish at Key Elementary School, at Patrick Henry, Korean at Abington, and at that time there was a school in Fort Myer, and Vietnamese in Glen Carlin School. So that was a major influx of refugees. And later, I was fortunate in 1980 to be appointed as the first Latina administrator supervising all programs for immigrants or children of immigrants and refugees. And we established exemplary programs thanks to outstanding teachers, as well as federal grants that we received from the US government.
And so, how long were you? How long did you serve as the administrator?
I served as an administrator until 2007. So I was, for 32 years, and I decided to retire from Arlington at that time in 2007. And I know there was a group of Latinos that felt that we needed to have a Latina on the school board. And so I was, people like Walter Tejada, who's on the county board, Alfonso Lopez, they encouraged me to run for office, and I was elected by 2008 with the purpose of enhancing graduation rates. Latinos had the largest dropout rate in Arlington, and at that time, I was also on the board of Northern Virginia Community College, when we realized that there were at least 40% of students that were entering remedial classes at Nova. And so my goal was to enhance graduation rates and college preparation so that students would be successful at the university level.
And how long were you on the Arlington School Board?
8 years. I was in Arlington School Board until 2016, by 2016. And I was championing, of course, programs for English as a second language, Spanish at elementary school, starting programs like the Arlington Community High School for older immigrant students, as well as opening more schools given the increase of enrollment in the schools. And I was very proud also to advocate for the historic designation of Stratford Middle School and now the Dorothy Ham Middle School to recognize the integration of African American students in the Arlington Public Schools. And Dorothy Ham was the first school where they were integrated.
Now, as I understand it, you are also an adjunct faculty member at Georgetown University.
Yes, I have had the privilege to work at Georgetown in the linguistics department. I taught bilingualism as well as foundations of multicultural education, supervised practicum students who wanted to be teachers for teaching English as a second language and bilingual education. I have throughout my life been an advocate for enhancing bilingualism in the schools.
Well, and we haven't even gotten to the Dream Project yet, which is what I'd like to learn more about next. It sounds like all of these past experiences led to the Dream Project. So, but talk a little bit more. What else was going on at the time that convinced you that the Dream Project was something that you wanted to do?
Well, as I mentioned before, I came to this country as a senior in high school without financial means to go to college, and I had that opportunity. So when in 2010, we had Ken Cuccinelli as the Republican Attorney General in Virginia, who sent a memorandum to colleges and universities not to admit undocumented students. And immediately parents and community members and students were devastated. They have worked so hard. Many of them came to Arlington as children, some as babies, and now they found that they couldn't continue in college, even though they were paying out-of-state tuition. And so at the same time, at the federal government, the DREAM Act, which was legislation that would have allowed children who came here before the age of 16 to have permanent residency and not to face deportation, and that failed by 6 votes in December 2010. So with these different events and the turmoil that we were facing against immigrants, that's when we decided to get together community members and educators, the families and students in my home, in the living room here where I'm being interviewed. And we said, we have to establish a nonprofit organization, raise funds, mentor students, and help them to go to college. And so as a result, by 2011, we had 4 scholarships, and now we have 100 scholarships. So the organization has grown, but more than anything, we have been with our students and families advocating at all levels, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, for to eliminate barriers to access education. At the state level, students were finally admitted, but they were charged out of state tuition. The deferred action for childhood arrivals, that was an executive order that President Obama enacted, and our students in Virginia, they were still charged out of state, even though they had protected status. And so we advocated, and the Attorney General Herring issued a memorandum. And so the deferred action for childhood arrivals, what we called our DACA students, had in-state tuition. But again, other students that arrived after 2014, they had to pay again out-of-state tuition. They were not allowed. And then we had the Trump administration that issued, the refugee ban, family separation, and other measures that created chaos and insecurity in our communities. And so our students and their families needed support. Then the pandemic came, and the pandemic again hit our families because they did not have access to health insurance, to state or federal service. They couldn't access, for example, unemployment. And so again, the DREAM project and our generous donors and supporters help us have an emergency fund. And we currently are supporting our students so they can continue in college. The DREAM project students, almost 90% of them graduate from college. This is an incredible rate. And so we want to see that our students continue and they graduate from schools, contribute to our community, and are amazing professionals.
Well, that certainly sounds like a very impressive project, and I congratulate you on being the founder. And are you optimistic now with the future of the Dream Project? What would you tell us?
Yes, I am, because the state, the General Assembly has enacted in-state tuition for all students that graduate from Virginia high schools who have paid taxes for 2 years. And then now, recently, there's a legislation that has passed, led by Alfonso Lopez, to have state assistance to these students, because you see, these students are not eligible to federal assistance, be it loans or, and many other scholarships. So we are very thankful to our elected officials for their advocacy and support, to our Governor Northam, who has been very supportive of these students. And now we have our hopes in the federal government so that we can finally pass the DREAM Act.
Well, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. We're getting towards the end of the program, but one, I know you have been the recipient of many very distinguished awards, and I'm just curious, which has been the most meaningful to you, and why would that be the case?
Well, I'm very humbled to have received some awards, and I cannot choose one really because, for example, I received the AUW, the American University Woman Award, to finish my dissertation. After becoming US citizen and having a doctorate, I received the Fulbright Scholar Award to go back to Bolivia and enhance training for teachers in Bolivia. Then the Mexican Legal Defense Fund recognized the work for advocacy for immigrant students. And in Arlington, I was blessed to receive the Arlington Community Foundation Award and the Washingtonian of the Year. So all of these awards, actually, they don't mean that I have done these things. Is that other people and myself, we work together toward a goal of opening opportunities for our students, for students that, be it that they are in other countries, be it that they are in the United States, who due to poverty, immigration status, they don't have access to higher education. And I believe that higher education has changed my life, has changed the life of my family, and I'm very grateful.
So, in summary, Dr. Violand-Sanchez, what would you say in your lifetime has been the accomplishments that you are the most proud?
Well, I would say my family. My mother, Emma Sanchez, was able to come to the United States when she was in her 90s, became a US citizen, and I was able to have her in my home until the day she died when she was 100. My children, who are both teachers, James and Julie, and it's just the family support, but also the community support. The Dream Project, for example, the parents of the students, the donors, the board members, they all work together very hard to provide better opportunities to low-income students and faith communities. So I feel blessed to have lived in Arlington, Virginia, and to have had the opportunities for my family as well as for other students, especially immigrants and refugees that face many barriers to access higher education.
I want to thank Dr. Emma Violand-Sanchez for joining me today. I hope this Stories of Life episode inspires you to think in new ways about your own life experiences. This program is broadcast Sundays at 5:30 p.m. and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on Comcast Channel 69 or Verizon Channel 38 in Arlington, Virginia, or streaming live at those times on arlingtonmedia.org. Aging Matters is also on the radio every Tuesday at 2 p.m. on WERA-LP Arlington 96.7 FM. And you can check out Aging Matters website, agingmattersonline.com, for information about all radio programs and TV episodes. Thank you for watching today's program. Please join me for the next Aging Matters. And until then, remember, age is just a number, not a label.